burnt out. The technique of preparation by burning is very old, but effective and very accurate. A prepared metal prong in the shape of the tang is heated until red hot and pushed through a pre-drilled hole in the beechwood block. The external shape is roughly worked by a rasp, so it fits the hand and the sword can be wielded easily. The grip is then polished using sandpaper. Finally, beeswax is applied to the grip and it is highly polished using a cloth. In the following still shots, we shall go over the making of the sword from raw materials to the finished product again. The slot in the guard made by forging is never precise enough to ensure that the whole assembly fits together perfectly. This is why we engrave the so-called seating grooves on the front face of the guard, which hug the profile of the root of the blade. The grooves give a firm and exact fit of the blade in the guard. Next, we slide the guard onto the tang. This is followed by the handle and the lower part of the pommel. The protruding part of the tang is then carefully riveted over so that all the important parts of the sword become one strong single unit. To make the sword construction sufficiently compact, it is important that a few basic principles are observed. The contact surfaces of the edges of the blade must precisely sit in the seating grooves engraved in the guard. In the same manner, the grip, guard and pommel must be in contact over the largest area possible. Riveting over the edge of the tang gives rise to the only and principal mechanical union of the whole construction of the sword. The upper part of the pommel is only a complementary element of the hilt, used for counterbalancing and decorating the sword. It is fixed by two rivets pushed through the holes in the lower part of the pommel. The protruding ends of the rivets are then beaten flat. This is the final difficult operation in assembling the sword. We proceed with the utmost care so as not to damage the finished decoration and the surfaces of the different elements of the hilt. The sword is now complete, but the scabbard used for carrying and protecting the sword against the weather is equally important. It consists of two parts, made of beechwood, into which we chiseled a space imitating the shape of the blade. This should mean that the sword sits within the scabbard without moving. After gluing the two parts together, the surface is worked into the desired shape using a plane and chisels. The next operation is fixing a thin cattle skin onto the wooden core. This work must be executed with precision so that the final joint fits perfectly. A combination of solid wooden core covered in leather provides the best protection to the steel blade of the sword. In the Middle Ages, the scabbard would not be supplied together with the sword. The owner had the scabbards made separately, or would even produce it himself from available materials. This is the reason why swords can be categorized into groups by their type and age, but it is impossible with their scabbards. Less expensive and less magnificent swords might probably do with a sheath sewn from a single piece of thin skin without using the wooden core. However, the replica of our sword is more imposing in nature, and as such is accompanied by a scabbard more appropriate for such a quality sword. The skin is treated with a brush and a simple copper tip is added at the end. At the back, a copper clasp to enable carrying the sword on a belt is firmly fixed by means of a thin leather strip. Assembling the sword was the last operation, and now it is time to test the basic properties of the sword in hand. First, the flexibility of the sword. The swordsmith should know the maximum bend from his own experience. In this case, it is just as it should be. The second, equally important test is cutting. Before the test is carried out, the sword needs to be sharpened using a fine whetstone. We will not be cutting the stone or iron bars. Instead, we will use a plain tube with a 1 centimeter thick wall made of wound carton. Its toughness and resistance will do for our purpose. The cutting test has been successfully passed. Now the sword that has been named Veligrad may be shipped to its